All right, welcome everybody. We're pleased to have Dr. Horton here with us today. Dr. Robert Horton is a distinguished professor in soil science here at Iowa State. Dr. Horton received his bachelor's in agronomy and a master's in soil science from Texas A&M University. He then attended New Mexico State University, where he got his PhD in soil physics in 1981, following which he began his career here at Iowa State University. Dr. Horton's research interests include soil physical properties and processes with a primary focus on coupled heat, water, and chemical transfer in soil. Today, however, he's going to talk to us about his experience in mentoring graduate students. Please help me welcome Dr. Horton.
Can you hand that to me, Sonia?
Yeah. Do you want it on your tie?
Welcome. Can you hear me back there? Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you came today. As Cassie said, it's a kind of a different seminar today. It's a seminar about mentoring graduate students. And in my long career here at Iowa State University, my favorite thing is working with students, working with young students. So I really want to, talk about that today and share some of my experiences and some of my thoughts about that. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important, we sometimes get confused. We think the main thing is the project or the journal paper. But for me, it's not. It's the people. It's the students. Because we have an opportunity as faculty to mentor, to help guide and help form the next generation of scientists who they themselves will have their own students. And so the impact is, I think, really huge, this opportunity that we have. And when I think about mentoring graduate students, I think about it more like a family relationship than a business deal. And that's really what I want to communicate with you today. When I first arrived at Iowa State University in 1981, there was a professor that had been retired, a distinguished professor, Don Kirkham. And Don Kirkham had a long career as a soil physicist here. And actually, the position I was hired into was one, sort of the next one after him in the soil physics here in the department. And I was a little bit intimidated as a young scientist just coming in, because I knew that he had quite a career, had quite a career. And when we first met, he asked me, "Who did you study with?" And I told him my professor's name from Texas A&M and my professor's name from New Mexico State. And then he said to me, "Well, that makes you my grand student and my great-grand student." And so we shook hands, and it was like, welcome to the family. And no, I was no longer had any fears or intimidation or anything like that. And I think that's mostly what it should be like when we're mentoring our graduate students. It's somebody that's a member of our academic family. I'm going to just take a moment now, and I'm going to just go through the list of my former students who are now working as faculty positions. They're now teaching their own students. I have other students that worked in industry and worked in government. They're not on the list, but I just want to show this to give the idea that this goes on for generations when we're working with students. So just bear with me, I'll do it quickly. Dr. Chung is a professor in South Korea. Jim Hamlet in Penn State University. Ibrahim Nassar in Alexandria, Egypt. Gerard Klutenberg is a professor at Kansas State University, and Gerard Klutenberg is a former student who has received an award from the Soil Science Society of America called the Kirkham Soil Physics Award. Binayak Mohanty is at Texas A&M, and he also received the Kirkham Soil Physics Award. Mushtaq Ahmed works in Oman. Ming-An Shao is a professor in China, and last year Ming-An Shao was elected to the National Academy of Sciences in China. So one of the very few soil scientists that has received that honor. And when I was visiting with Dr. Shao about that, he told me something that astonished me. he told me that he's been the mentor for 100 students, graduate students. That's a huge number. That's the total of his master's, his PhD, and his postdocs. 100 people. So I have 100 grand students just from this one person. Tusheng Ran is a professor in China. Kasuke Noborio is a professor in Japan. Ibrahim Al-Salama is professor in Saudi Arabia. Dan Ressler is an associate professor at Susquehanna University of Pennsylvania. Jae-Hoon Lee is a professor at University of Tennessee. Victor Elia is professor in Philippines, Los Baños. Frank Casey, professor at North Dakota State University. Salam Al-Jabri in Oman, he's an Omani. Chenju Wang, professor in Xi'an, China. Tyson Ochsner is a distinguished professor at Oklahoma State University. Josh Heitman, professor at North Carolina State University. Dedrick Davis, assistant professor at Alabama A&M. Jake Prater, assistant professor in Wisconsin. Aaron Day, assistant professor at North Dakota State University. And Yuki Kojima, assistant professor in Japan. I had the privilege, really honestly, to work with these young people, in small ways. I could, look at it from one way. I didn't mess them up too bad, or another way, to help them, to try to coach, to mentor, to help them grow. And what I say to all of my students when they come to work with me, I want to help you to grow as a scientist and grow as a person. And that's my goal in all this on mentoring graduate students. I want to share some advice that I wrote down for mentors. So just like some bullets here, some lists. Take an interest in developing a student's career and well-being. Really take an interest in the student. It's not just a worker bee, somebody to do something for you or to work on a project, but a human being that has real desires and interests, and we can really encourage and help them. Have an interpersonal as well as a professional relationship with the student. It's more like a family, is how I see it. Not just in the workplace, not just business only, but really caring and helping the student to grow. Advance the student's academic and professional goals in directions most desired by them. Don't just clone ourselves. Don't imagine what would be good for the student, but each student, like if you have multiple children, I'm blessed with 7 children, so they have different personalities, different desires and interests, and the same with graduate students. Unique, individual, one-of-a-kind persons that have desires and interests. And it behooves us as a mentor to get to know them and to serve them for what their desires are. Also to tailor the mentoring style and content to the individual. It's almost just ditto of what I just said, that each person is unique and not force the student into my cookie cutter, but to serve that student in a way that's effective. Getting to know them, how they communicate, getting to know them, how to serve them to grow. Some more of this stuff, recommendations for mentors. Mentors could be you that are faculty, but many of you I can see are graduate students here too, that maybe someday you'll be mentors of graduate students or in some other capacity in your work. So promote an environment that is intellectually stimulating and free of harassment. I think it's so important to have an environment where people can think. It's not just get on the project, fulfill the objective, robotically do some measurements, but to really be creative in thinking and discussing, free to make some mistakes and learn from them. Be supportive, equitable, accessible, encouraging, and respectful, to show maximum respect to each person. Not to think about the person as somebody that's working for me, that I command, but somebody that I can serve. Recognize and respect the cultural backgrounds of students. Like here in this audience, there are many different cultural backgrounds, many countries, many different religious backgrounds, many different things just, in family and et cetera. But to be able to respect that and honor that and welcome that into the work group, work environment. Be sensitive to the power imbalance in the student-advisor relationship. Not to abuse or take advantage of students. Not to be unjust or unreasonable. We know that many graduate students, those that are on assistantships, are half-time employees. To demand or require them to work morning, afternoon, evening, and weekend is not just. That's not justice. That's taking advantage of them in a way that's not right or good. But to have an environment where when it's time to work, we all work hard. But our life is not only work. We should have some freedom to develop as human beings in relationships and interest, spiritually, intellectually, and physical exercise types of things. We should develop whole people and not just focus it on work, work, work. Other things that mentors do. We as mentors need to model professional responsibility to our students. Many of our students realize that most of us do some kind of teaching on campus or off campus, or we do some research. But there's a lot of other stuff in this job. There's committee work, there's professional society, there's paper reviewing, there's a lot of other things involved. We need to at least inform our students what that's like, what it's like to be a professor, to be a faculty, to be in a, scientifically in a profession, that it's not just the things that we interface with them, to help them to realize what this would be like if they continue in this career. We should oversee the professional development of our students. We should realize, based on what their goals and desires are, where they are right now, and what are some steps that we can help, to do to help them to grow, to be in a position to reach those goals. We should assist with finding other mentors. Some of our students have a broader interest than what we are educated in, and we need to find them other colleagues that can also mentor them, that have the knowledge or the information on those specific parts of their studies that they need help in. I can help students on some areas, but not all areas. We need to get them connected with other mentors as well. Encourage the effective use of time, what I call action plans. It's really, really, really important to sit down with students and say, let's look ahead. What do we need to do to, be successful in this program? And then break it down into steps. What are the steps to get there? We don't climb the mountain in one step. We can break it down and then put that on a calendar so that we can have goals to try to achieve these steps in an orderly and a timely way. And it brings some order to the study of the student, helps them to make progress, meaningful progress, measurable progress. It's important to seek common goals, to set the plan that I just mentioned. So ask the students, what do you want to do after you graduate? And what are the skills and abilities do you need? Assess, where are you now and what needs to be in place to be ready to reach those. So you can do some planning, set some goals together. If it involves courses or studies or working with other people, but to really try to make it a rich and complete graduate program. General goal, whenever I interview a student as a possible, to possibly, join my group or I would be their professor, I always tell them the same thing. If we match up, my goal would be that they would grow as a scientist and grow as a whole person. Not just be a lab rat, not just work, but grow as a person, a full person. So non-negotiables for me when I talk with graduate students, one, there's got to be some interest in soil science. That's my discipline, right? So if they want to go to graduate school and I'm going to be their professor, they've got to have some interest in soil science, preferably something on soil physics, because that's more my specialty area, but it's got to be there. Can't be, I want to get a graduate degree. That's just not good enough, right? It's got to be some common link that we can work together. And then there's got to be some sense assessment of character, ethical people, honesty, so that we can have a trusting relationship and work close together in the program. This should be a golden time in soil science. You know, soils have a role to play in all of these big issues, these global issues. Hunger, feeding the world. Soil has a role in food production. In the energy field, soil has a role in that as well. Climate change. Soil can't solve all the problems with global warming and the climate change issues, but it has a role in it. You know, a lot of the organic matter content in soil. Many things with water, you know, because at the soil surface rains, something infiltrates, something runs off, something leaches, something evaporates. It's part of the soil is part of the Earth's surface of the hydrologic cycle. And water quality, many of the chemicals we apply to the soil get to water, for example. Or soil itself. Here in Iowa, one of the biggest pollutants is soil itself and soil erosion. And because I have my friends from geotechnical engineering and civil engineering here, I should have added one more on geotechnical stuff, roads or structures, you know, foundations. Also, soil has a role in there. My apologies. It's agronomy after all. Come on. So my own personal soil story. I went to college at Texas A&M without a clue what to major in. And I studied science, but after my first year, I went home for a summer job, and I really didn't, know. I didn't have any direction, and I talked to my parents about maybe dropping out of school for a while till I could realize what to focus on. But they didn't want me to drop out, and they encouraged me to keep going, but to give it some thought. So I did some soul searching, some thinking, some praying, and I realized inside of me really I had a deep compassion for people without enough food to eat, hungry people. And so I decided I'm going to look into agriculture. Now my dad was a career person in the military. We didn't live on a farm or ag background or anything. So I looked in my college catalog. There's no book here, but it's different than today. We actually had a book. We actually called it, do you know what a book is anymore? It's a book, and we had pages, and we called it a college catalog. And I looked in that, and I saw agriculture, and I saw a major called agronomy. I never heard the word before in my life, but I looked at it, and the first two classes were Introduction to Crop Science and Introduction to Soil Science. And so I enrolled in those. I really liked the crop science class. I learned a lot, but something about the soil science class hooked me. I became interested. The teacher was very dynamic. It's a man named Murray Milford. I don't know if any of you know Dr. Milford. And just the way he presented it, I didn't even know soil science existed before this, but I was attracted, and I started to see the importance of soil for humanity and what I call the beauty and the wonder of soil. And so I changed my major to soil science and continued on, finished my bachelor's degree, and I stayed at Texas A&M for my master's degree, and I worked with just a super scientist, Cornelius van Bavel. He was from the Netherlands. He studied here, got his PhD here at Iowa State, and moved around a little bit, but settled at Texas A&M. And I got a chance to work with him, and he was really good for me because I didn't have a lot of experience. I'm telling you, he was a person who had weekly meetings with me so that he could find out what I did last week, and he could tell me what to do the next week. He was a little bit tough and controlling sort of personality and demanding. When I failed to do it, he'd yell at me. But to his credit, when I achieved it, he would praise me. So he was even-handed that way. But he really stayed on top of my progress. I graduated, then moved to the big university that this famous university, New Mexico State University, and worked with really top scientists Peter Wierenga there. And Peter Wierenga, when I first got there and was settling in, told me stuff like this. He did not want to babysit me. I was a PhD student. He expected me to think and come up with my own project. He wasn't going to tell me what to do. And he worked hard, and he expected me to work hard. And I was like, whoa, this is 180 degrees different on my PhD professor than my master's professor who told me everything to do. And I thought, wow, and I was pretty nervous about it, but you get into it, and I liked it. His door was always open for discussion, but he wasn't hunting me down, and he wasn't telling me what to do. He wanted me to be able to engage and think and own. These mentoring styles, I have them down as two. One, authoritarian. That's where the mentor is the boss. They're telling the student what to do, and they have demands on the student and expectations, and they're not asking the student what they want to do. They're telling the student what to do. And these tend to be somewhat controlling in the relationship. The other one, I say, is the professor, major professor, mentor serves as an authority. They're available as an authority. They're a resource. They have experience and insights, and they're looking at this more in a collaborative way with the student. Working on a project, it's more relational, it's more teamwork, and the freedom they give the student to have own ideas, own suggestions, not totally independent, but in discussion, to make decisions, but wanting the student to take leadership. I think it really builds a student's confidence to be able to work this way. Not being told, but being asked first what they think and their input, and then discuss it, kind of picking apart strengths and weaknesses, but really building a confidence and experience in the student. I like to use this. It may be hard to see. It's a little bit hard to see up here, but it's a funnel is what this is right here. And I call it the reverse funnel image. Most of us use a funnel. We know we pour something in the mouth and it goes through the neck so that we don't spill a liquid. But this one I'm calling the reverse funnel because I'm saying here, imagine a student entering in the neck and they're going to come out the mouth. When a new student comes in, they don't have much experience, so you as a mentor should have a pretty tight boundary. You need to give them advice, coaching, guidance, helping them along the way. But as the student builds experience, gains experience, builds trust, you make it wider boundaries. So the student has wider way to roam. So give ideas, have choices, do some things without those tight boundaries. And the goal is, as the student is graduating, out of this wide mouth, they're out of your authority now. They're ready to go on to the next phase of their life. If it's a PhD student, let's say, for example, they're ready to go on and to do some mentoring themselves. So I like this example. My wife and my wife is here today. She never comes to my talks, but I'm really glad she's here today. But she and I use this symbol for raising our children also. The young children, they need a lot of parental boundaries. Because they're just messing around looking at the world, And then as they get more and more experience and have trust, they're ready. And then when they leave the house, they're out. You got to let them grow and develop. I think graduate education is like that in a lot of ways. That's a way I like to also view myself as a major professor working with the students. So when they're new, need help, close watch, but give a lot of freedom, widen those boundaries as they get more and more experience. Don't treat your PhD students with this tight little boundary like you would a new master's student. Give them freedom to grow. I put this up here and I brought a copy. A couple years ago I had a chance to write a little article in the whatever it says, Crop Soils Agronomy News. It's a really short article. It's one sheet of paper, one page, and a half a page on the back. I have a bunch of copies. If you're interested in that, you can pick it up at the end of the seminar. But it tells a little bit more of my own personal story. Early in my career, I tended to be, more the authoritarian. I wanted my hand on everything. I didn't fully trust my students. I wanted to be involved on everything. I was assistant professor. It's my career, the tenure. I wanted this stuff to succeed. I had my hand on there. And then something happened, a tragedy in our home, where I had a young daughter who died in an accident. And that thing that happened in my home had a tremendous impact on my life. It set me in a place to really do some deeper thinking and evaluation, self-evaluation on what was important in my life. And so one was I wanted to reorder my life. I had been in a habit where I was only working. Coming to work in the morning, in the evening, and the weekends. I wanted to change that and to only have a schedule of work that was reasonable, and I could have some other time in my life to grow as a human. I wanted to put my first priority on relationship with God, and I wanted to put priority on relationship with family and friends also. And my work was there, but not the highest priority. I wanted to reprioritize my life. I tell this little story that I really think that the loving relationships are important, even in the workplace. We don't use that word often in our workplace. And by love, I don't mean romantic stuff. I mean doing what's good for the other, acting in a way for the good of the other, serving the other. And I think that could really happen. I changed, and I began to try to empower my students to grow more like the authority model. And I tell you, that was so rewarding to me, both in the discoveries of the students and the productivity, you could say, but also in the relationships with that. I really encourage you to think about that. If you want to hear more of my story on that, pick up this little page. We'll give you some information about that. Okay, collaboration has some synergy. I may know something about the topic, my students may know something, but if we get together and share our ideas, we're bound to come up with something better. There's 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It's going to be something more. We'll get a better project, a better way forward by good brainstorming, discussing, and working together. So collaborating. Now I have 5 things I want to tell you. I have a little bit of time, so I try to tell these concisely. 5 things I've learned. I've summarized these up. 1, okay, I used the word love, but now I'm going to put an adjective on it. Tough love is sometimes needed in the workplace. We can't just settle for being nice. We don't just let somebody do what they want to do to be nice to them, but we have to engage and really embrace this intellectually and give our best effort in mentoring. We do what's good for the student. The example I want to share here is I had a graduate student some years ago who was the best mathematician I've had as a graduate student. There's somebody here from the math department, applied math department today. He worked with some of the math professors while he was here. But he was taking advanced math courses. And one day he came to me and said that he would like to drop a course that he was taking. He said that he had gotten a little bit too busy on his research, hadn't kept up with the studies, and wanted to drop it. So I was listening to him, and I knew he needed this class. It was an important class because I knew his skills and his goals to really be good at analyzing data and doing mathematical modeling. So I said, well, you need that class. And he said, well, he can take it again the next semester. And I said, are you at a place where you could cut back on your research right now? He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm not going to sign the drop form. I want you to hang in there and do your best and learn it and finish the class. and then it's going to save you time in the long run. It'll be a good challenge for you. And I said, if you fail it, you're going to take it again anyway. You know, it's no big deal. He said he didn't like it. He had the form, and I don't know how they do it now, but you had to sign something. I wouldn't sign it. He went away, studied a while, came back to me a few weeks later, and he said, I got it. He said, I studied it, and the light bulb came on in his mind, and he got and understood the part that was confusing to him. He finished the class well, but he also learned that he could overcome that problem that he had. So that was good. So tough love is important. This one I say, ideas may be more important than some technical skills. So have an environment that goes beyond just completing tasks. Include the questions, the discussion, the pondering, the thinking. Germinate some ideas in your program. Sometimes I think about this. When you get old like me, sometimes you get a little cranky, but I wonder how much thinking do we really do nowadays in the university? We're doing stuff, we're busy, but are we thinking about it? I think ideas and thinking needs to make a comeback for us. I had a student, he was not my graduate student. One of my colleagues' student came and knocked on my door and said he was from crop physiology and he wanted to study root growth in soil. So he wanted to talk to me about some ways to characterize the pore structure so he could know how the roots might grow in the pores. Well, of course, I didn't have very many good ideas, so we brainstormed some different ideas, and then I had a device at the time called a tension infiltrometer. It was just something we slapped together in the lab, and it wasn't very fancy. And I said, well, if you measure infiltration when the water's at different tensions or matrix potentials, you can exclude different pore sizes from water flowing in those pore sizes and get an idea of pore size distribution for how water moves. Maybe that's related to how roots can grow. So he took that away, did some measurements. He came back later and said that he could design that instrument better than the one I gave him. And he described it to me, and I said, yeah, I think you're right. So he built it and demonstrated it was a better design. He made an automated tension infiltrometer, and he got a patent on it. It's sold. Every place I go in the world, they have these automated tension infiltrometers now. It was marketed and dispersed. And he came back to me later and he said to me, I think we could use the tension infiltrometer to measure the saturated and unsaturated hydraulic conductivity of field soil. And I said, what do you mean? And so he took a sheet of paper and he drew these cartoons on it. He said, well, we can measure this, and if we can figure out this, and he showed it to me conceptually. And I said, I think you're right. And I knew a little bit of mathematics, so I put some equations to it, differential equation, and integrated them, and we came up with a neat little equation, and we published that paper, and until just a couple years ago, it was the most cited journal article I've ever been a co-author on. And this guy really didn't know any math. I want to tell you, there's a math guy here. I hesitate to say that. He didn't really know math, but he could think. He had ideas. He had concepts. He was able to express this in such a way that would feed to our collaboration. I really like this ideas. Another is patience is necessary if you're mentoring graduate students. This I didn't develop this, but somebody told me this before, and I like it. They said, take a sheet of paper and write your name with your normal hand that you use. Then put your pencil in the other hand and write your name with your offhand. And look and see the quality of those. And he said, your normal hand has experience. It can write it. Now, my writing is not very legible, but it's better with my normal hand. He said, it has experience. You can read it. Your other hand has no experience. It's hard to read it. It's sloppy. He said, think about this with your graduate students. You've got experience, but your student doesn't. They're just coming in. They're just learning. Don't put it onto them, the expectation to have the same experience level that you have. Be patient with them. Give them time to learn. Give them time to make some mistakes and recover and get some experience so they can get better and better at whatever it is, if it's modeling or measurements or whatever it is. But be patient is an important characteristic in this relationship. I say this one, pursue knowledge, not fame or money. Sometimes we get these things out of order. We think, I want to get that big grant, or I want to, do this paper, or I want to get this award, or those are out of order. First, have some good ideas that lead to some good research, making some good discoveries. You can publish those, then the publications are easy, if you have that. And then if someone decides to give you an award, okay. But don't target the wrong things out of order. Think about, knowledge and science, doing good science. Really, to do the thinking and the work to do the good science is important. I just have a little story about that. And this was a student who came to knock on the door of my office. He was a person. He came and knocked on my office door many years ago, and he told me that he just graduated with his PhD from Canada. I didn't know him, but he knew me, my name from the literature. His wife was doing a graduate degree here in seed science, I believe, or crop physiology. And he told me he was going to be in town while she finished her program. He was a Chinese man. Dr. Ren, Tu-Sheng Ren, some of you may know the name. And his wife was Tian, was here. And he asked me if I had support for a postdoc. Now, I had just hired a postdoc, and I didn't have any funding, and I said, I don't. And then he said to me something interesting. He said, well, can I work for you for free? And I liked that. I had some sense that, I shouldn't say yes, because, didn't want to take advantage of him. I don't know the university rules. I'm sure that you shouldn't say yes, but I said to him, well, listen, I don't think that would be good, but if you would like, we can set a couple meetings just to trade some ideas, see what we can come up with. So we did that. We met, we shared some ideas, we came up with a good idea, and I came up with a little bit of money. First it was just hourly money, and then later I got some money for a postdoc. But we came up with this idea to work on a tool. It's called a Thermo-TDR Sensor. And if any of you take my classes or follow my work at all, I'm still working with this sensor. It's a sensor, it measures electrical properties and thermal properties of soil. You can measure the water content, the dynamic bulk density, the liquid water flux, the vapor flux, freezing, thawing, ice content, ice melting. You can measure so many properties of the soil. And I still collaborate with Dr. Ren. I visit him when I go to China. But this guy said, I work for free. I like that. He was interested in knowledge and making some discovery. Somehow or another, not working for free, I'm not trying to promote that, but discovery is good. Okay, this last one then is Horton is wrong again. Humility. If you're going to be a mentor, it's not about controlling, it's not about pride, but humility. I think in all relationships in life, humility is the right approach. But this one, I have evidence for it, that it's important. So I've had students come to me and say, I have an idea, yada, yada, this, that, this. And they tell me the idea, and I think about it, and I say, I don't really think that's going to work. And so they really want to do it. So we negotiate a little bit, and so I say, well, tell you what, let's define out a particular experiment. You take a little bit of time, explore it, and if it works, we can go on from there. If it doesn't work, we'll drop it, and you get on to something else. So that's usually satisfies. But in my mind, I think it's not going to work, and sometimes my mouth tells them, I don't think it's going to work, but you really want to do it, so we can do a limited thing. And I'm wrong, you know? It just happens. So humility is good. So just two quick examples. One, I had a student, Jae-Hoon Lee. There's somebody here that maybe had him as a professor at Tennessee. He said we can put a TDR sensor in the field below a dripper line, and we can have water with low electrical conductivity come out and then change it to higher electrical conductivity. And by measuring the electrical conductivity of the soil, we can measure the chemical transport properties. So we can predict how chemicals will move in the soil. I said, look, you're just putting it right at the surface. It's not going to tell you how they're going to move deep in the soil. He did it. He monitored the tile drainage, and he found that it worked. I didn't think it was going to work. He did all kind of lab measurements and field measurements, and it worked. So blessings to Jae-Hoon Lee. Taught the old man something, but humble pie was good for me too. Second one, I had a student, Joshua Heitman. He came to my office and said, I think we can use a sensible heat balance, measure the amount of heat that goes into a layer of soil, heat that goes out, and the change of storage, sensible heat. And if they don't balance, whatever's left over is either evaporating water or came from condensating water. So we can measure the evaporation condensation in unfrozen soil or the ice formation, ice melting in frozen soil. And I told him, I know that idea. I read about it when I was in graduate school, and the person that wrote the article said it failed. And he said, yeah, but we have better instruments now. And I told him, you're right, but I still don't think it's going to work. It worked! We did all kinds of measurements. This one is from a big, several square meters and meter deep weighing lysimeter in the field. Change of mass measures evaporation. This is this evaporation down here. And these are the heat pulse sensors measuring evaporation in the same lysimeter. It's not quite one-to-one. Up here it's a little bit low. These are pretty much one-to-one. Here the high one is off a little bit. But really close enough to say, we have lots of measurements say, this method worked. So cheers to Josh Heitman and Horton Learned Again to be humble. And you can learn a lot from your students if you just listen. Now I wrote to my graduate students and I said, look, I'm going to give a talk on mentoring. And I want you to just take a little bit of time and write to me so I can share it with the audience. They can get an insight on what you think is good mentoring. I want you to say, make it personal, what did I do, Horton do, that was good as a mentor? And what did Horton do that was bad, that you didn't help you don't like? I got many pages of notes back from them, and I picked some out that I think can be concise to give you a sense of some ideas of how the students viewed a good mentor. They wrote 0 comments back on what was bad. Now see that? I can already see it's a biased survey. They were being nice on that because I can think of many bad things that Horton did or didn't do. But I'm only going to read these. You can get a sense from the students what they liked. You were always accessible. A few words of encouragement meant a lot. You were pretty rigid about courses, which was something that helped me realize I was more capable than I ever believed. Anytime I gave you a draft, they mean of a paper, it was not more than 2 days before I got it back. This helped me learn to write. The most helpful entity I received from you is trust, which provided me the confidence to do research and to appreciate science and life. Another thing from you is clear thinking. I'm amazed by your ability to sense problems and connect questions with scientific principles. You provide each student with appropriate advice and assistance, thus making the most of their abilities. I think 2 keys to effective mentoring are to love your students and to spend time with them. Thanks for doing both. You helped me grow into not only a qualified researcher, but also a faithful person. In the group, students feel like they are joining a big family. You recognized and appreciated each student's uniqueness and always valued how much a student grew in various skills. I'm particularly impressed by how you taught me to write scientific papers and make presentations. You help students to network with top scientists to benefit their professional careers. I enjoyed arguing with you about science and life. Having genuine interest in other people and an open door was helpful. You trusted me to grow and were very patient with me. You treated students as individuals and helped them grow with their strengths while helping them to overcome personal challenges. You helped students make decisions so they owned their own decisions. You allowed us to learn from our mistakes. You trusted students and gave us space to grow. You worked with us rather than making us work for you. It was incredible how you helped us, even during field data collection. In conclusion, I want to say, effective mentoring is good for us as faculty. It's good for our souls. It's good for us professionally. It's good for the students. Helps them to grow. It's good for the discipline to help form the next generation of scientists in the discipline. I like that funnel. If it speaks to you, keep it and use it. Finally, let's be committed to serve others. Professors, serve your students. Don't have them serve you. Flip that around and make a commitment to serve them and be patient. Thank you for your attention. I know the time is short, but I welcome any questions that you have, and please pick up a handout if you're interested. Thank you for being here today. Questions? Or even better, your wisdom and comments. Yes, sir. Andy, yeah.
How often do you meet with your students now?
I just meet with them regularly, once a week, but I have an open door. The students are welcome to come anytime. So we have just one once a week meeting, but the door is open.
And what was one of the first changes you made? You described it as a life change event that you had.
Yeah.
What was one of the first changes you made kind of following that in terms of your approach? Because you're probably in the middle of advising someone. Right?
Sure, yeah.
So describe that transition.
Yeah, it was like when a plane is going to go supersonic, it's a little bit shaky. I was a little bit shaky in my life at that time. And on the personal level, I started praying, honest prayers. I was mostly focused on the death of my daughter. I wanted to know what happened, what death was about, to pray about that, study about that, learn about that. And I feel some personal consolations of God's grace. And so I started to get stronger and healed up, and I wanted to reevaluate my schedule, change it, so that I wasn't only working and family time and other interest time. And so in my workplace, I just started talking to my students a little bit about that, and I just started to slowly change how I talked with them. And I instead of having that, I think it was from insecurity, I wanted my hand on stuff. I took my hands off of it, and I want to discuss and talk on all aspects of their work, but not control or have to have my hand on every measurement and every step of the way. I don't know if that is exactly precisely good enough, but that's what's coming to my memory right now. Thank you for your question. Did you have a question? Okay, thank you. Any other questions today? Okay, it's a different seminar, I know. If you really want some hardcore soil physics, invite me back 1 or 2 years later. I can tell you about that. or take my soil physics class. Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, one more. Good.
So you mentioned this open door philosophy.
Yes.
In agronomy or in your department, I'm not sure what department you're in,
Agronomy.
is that common?
I think it just varies, from professor to professor and program to program, but traditionally our department has really, really strong graduate education. So I think I would, I don't want to speak for others, but I would say it's the norm. I think we really, we have a great track record. This whole thing that I put in Dr. Kirkham was, I didn't maybe say it with my words, but as an example that graduate education, good graduate education, has been going on here way before I started here. So I think it's part of our culture that we really care and do a good job on graduate education. Do you students agree with that? Or if you don't say anything out loud. I don't know. I feel like it's good, but as an older guy, I like to give this talk to give some encouragement, particularly to the younger faculty and the students, to really, if there's any wisdom in here for you, I like this more relational aspect to the work.
Yeah, Bob, I'm in civil engineering, and I don't think there's many civil engineering students here, but I would ask them to give a judgment in terms of how many have open door policy. It's not common in my department. Is any civil students here? So, would you agree? It's not. And we have windows on our doors, and everybody plasters over the windows, so you can't even see in. So we're in a different wavelength over there, but we're good people, but we haven't yet got down to open door.
Well, sometimes people get on to, I don't know if it's just engineers or everybody, but the idea of efficiency. We got to be more efficient, and we get onto the products and everything, but I really like it. Maybe this for Andy, I really backed away from not focusing on projects and papers, that sort of thing, and focus it on people. Because I realized, like death, like we had, Dr. Arrett, his sudden death here, and maybe we as a department can rethink this also, but just to cherish and value each person and the time that we have to share with people is more valuable, just so valuable in my mind compared to a project or a paper. It's people first, and then those other things come. And I could say some stuff, but my program got better when I made the change. Thank you for your comment. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So when I saw your comments in the very last slide, it reminded me of this philosophy called servant leader.
Yes.
Leadership.
Yes.
Have you read about those?
Sure.
As you were making
Yeah.
these changes and got the benefit from those, or you make this the way yourself? You develop this.
No, I had the sense in my studies, and I studied the Bible and saw that Jesus promoted the idea of servant leader, calling us that way. And that spoke to me quite a bit on this. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening.